So we know that Adam and Eve are aroma, they are naive, they're innocent, and the serpent is arum, he is not innocent. You use a word that could be good or bad, but in this case it's letting you know that these guys don't have the knowledge of what's going to happen, and he does. He does. So the first thing the serpent does is not call God by a name. That means that he's separate from God, is a little bit more than Adam certainly is. And then he puts a tiny distortion. And he's really aiming it at somebody in particular. Who does he say that to? Yeah, the woman. The woman. Go back one chapter. When God made this pronouncement, who was there in that you can eat of every tree except that tree? Who's present when God says that? Adam. Eve isn't. She's dependent on what Adam told her about what God said. So who does the serpent hit? He hits on the one who's dealing with secondhand knowledge. Remember, it's all with wordplay here. She's naive. It means that she doesn't have the intimate knowledge of what's going on. Adam has a little more knowledge because he was there. He personally heard God say it. Eve didn't. 2 or 3 actually is this point. And the woman corrects it. She says to the serpent, "We may eat of the trees of the garden. But God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden." But then something happens. What's the rest of the sentence? She adds to it. There's something that we have learned in psychology, and they're using it in politics a lot these days. The first person to make an argument establishes what we call a narrative. The first person in an argument sets up the left and right boundaries of where the debate is going to go. And the second person usually doesn't understand that the boundaries just got set. And you don't have to play by those rules. But we all do it. It's human nature. The first person in an argument, psychologists have seen this in human study all the time, is that the second person buys into what the first person says, not the core of it, but the language or the boundaries of it. And then the serpent just established that it is fair game to put an interpretation into God's laws. And we could add or subtract according to what we think God meant. And Eve took the bait. And she, like the serpent, added an interpretive line here. Later on, Moses gives the law, and heaven knows there were a lot of laws, right? But what did the Pharisees do later on? Because they got burned by being exiled. So what did they do with the law from the time of the return of exile to the time of Christ? They expanded on it. They built what we call hedges around the law. They're protective hedges. Baptists are notorious about this. What does Paul say about getting drunk? Don't do it, right? So what have we done with the rule about don't get drunk?
Don't drink wine at all.
Don't drink wine at all. Oh, we got a problem. What do we do with communion? What do we do with the fact that Jesus, his first public miracle was what? It was at the wedding, Cana, and he made water into, and what did the maitre d' say about the wine? It's the good stuff. It's the good stuff. The psalmist talks about wine in both positive and negative, so does Proverbs. And yet, typically what do we do when we think of alcohol? Only the bad side. So we build a hedge around the law. The one law that Paul tells us about wine is don't get drunk.
well, we put protective hedges around it because it's dangerous. Well, could you drown in water?
Yes, you can.
You can. Oh, we better make sure that nobody goes out on a river or boat or a lake, right? Because everybody might drown. So what happens is that our tendency is to add to the law to protect it. And that's what, because this first conversation that Satan has to us through the sermon is it is permissible to add interpretive layers to the law. It's okay to add interpretation above and beyond or protective layers. And that's exactly what Eve does. She buys into, oh, let me interpret what God said. Don't even touch it. Now, arguably, Adam may have told her that, don't go there. Don't even touch that tree, right? He might have done that, but in any case, she's bought the argument. Moses knows what's going to happen with the laws that he's going to be giving them through all the Exodus story. The temptation is going to be either to completely disobey the law or completely rewrite the law. It's our sin nature. We already see the setup for it in that she had something to it. The argument with this serpent. But the serpent, verse 4, the serpent said to the woman, you will surely not die. Okay, now that we've bought into it, we can add another layer of interpretation. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. What's the name of the tree?
Knowledge of good and evil.
So, he's using what God already said with a twist, but he's adding a layer to it. When you eat that tree, you'll be like God, knowing good and evil.
Be wise like God.
You'll be wise. You'll have our own. And so then we have this cascade of things going on. The serpent says to the woman, you will surely not die. And by the way, did he tell the truth? Did Eve drop dead the minute her tooth hit that fruit?
No.
No. Probably took another 900 years, according to the genealogy tables that we see later on. Physically, she doesn't die. Now, we can spiritualize that. Spiritually, she did. And also, something else, she became mortal. Just like I've got that timer going for when the time is going to run out on the clock on the camera. The timer has started on her lifespan. On the day that you eat it, the timer starts. And lo and behold, you will be like God, as it says in verse 4 or verse 5. And immediately, this woman imitates God. She saw the tree was good. Remember Genesis 1? God saw that the light was good. God saw that the land was good. God saw the vegetation was good. God saw the animals was good. He saw it, declared it good. Immediately, she assumes God's role. She sees the tree and its fruit and declares it good. It's good for food. It's a delight to the eyes. A desire to make one wise. Wise. And she took the fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband who was... Ouch. No. Where is Adam the whole time all this is taking place? What's the rest of the verse? He's with her. He's with her. He doesn't jump in and stop her. He doesn't jump in and correct what either the serpent or what she was saying. He doesn't go back and reset the rules going, no, 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 no. God said the left and right boundaries are here and here, not here and here. He abrogates his leadership. Now, he's not superior to the woman in terms of status and worth, but he is the leader, and he abandons his role as being the protective, guiding leader. And he lets her lead them into dangerous territory. So we talk a lot about that fruit being the first sin. But when we read the whole story very carefully, we realize, no, that was the moment that it all crystallized. But you can make a very good argument that her first sin was adding to Scripture and taking the role of God and seeing that the fruit looked good. And his first sin is, I'm not going to protect my wife. In fact, I'm going to follow her right over the cliff. When he had the ability to pull it back. Yeah, and the thing is you can see that. You can look at that and go, gosh, that looks like us. Doesn't it? The temptation, it's easy to understand when you put it in that kind of terminology. Oh, yeah. All right, take the fruit out of it and say in general what's going on. It goes, oh my goodness, this is starting to look a lot like us. A few weeks ago, Mike, you asked the question, what would it have been like if she and the woman eaten the fruit and the man didn't?
Yeah.
I think there's an answer. And Moses is using this story to make the rest of the law that he's talking about really come to the ground so that they understand where they've come from in terms of their sin, not just coming out of Egypt, but where their sin originates. If you would, let me see, Numbers, where is that passage right here? I didn't write in this one. I've got a problem of having 3 different study Bibles, and I didn't go on with this. I believe it is in Numbers chapter 20 that we're looking at. I can tell you for sure in just a moment. Excuse me? In the book of Numbers, I believe it is Numbers 20. When you flip over there, it's about that point. There is a whole chapter. Oh, here it is. No, not Numbers 20, Numbers 30. Numbers chapter 30. I'm going to read from Numbers chapter 30, and it starts off with what's going on with a woman she's still living with her father, but I'm going to pick up the theme in verse 6, where if she, a woman, marries a husband while under her vows or any thought, while she is under her vows or any thoughtless utterance of her lips by which she has bound herself, and her husband hears of it and says nothing to her on the day that he hears about it, then her vows will stand, and her pledges by which she has bound herself shall stand. Okay, picture this. You got a woman who makes a really stupid vow. She's pledging into something that was just not right, and her husband doesn't stop her. She's stuck. The consequences of whatever her decision was. But continue on there. That verse 8, he says something rather remarkable. But if, on the day that her husband comes to hear of it, he opposes her and he makes void her vow that was on her and the thoughtless utterance of her lips by which she bound herself, the Lord will forgive her. But any vow of a woman or a divorced woman, etc., it goes on, is, she's stuck because she doesn't have a man to protect her. Verse 10, and if she vowed in her husband's house or bound herself by a pledge with an oath, and her husband heard of it and said nothing to her and did not oppose her, then all her vows shall stand, and every pledge by which she bound herself shall stand. But if her husband makes them null and void on the day that he hears them, then whatever proceeds out of her lips concerning her vows or concerning her pledge of herself shall not stand. Her husband has made them void. Do you think that applies to what we just read about in Genesis 3? What kind of authority and power did Adam have, and he handed it over? Do you see where the sin really starts in all this? And I'm just looking at the men now. The sin of Adam starts because he's there. Remember, that passage just 3 times said, on the day he hears about it. And when did he hear about it? Right there. He's right there. And he is silent. He didn't defend his wife by saying, whoa, stop right there. You're going over the edge. He didn't do it. Does that answer your question a little bit? About
Yes.
what would have happened had Adam said, don't eat it? Or
Yeah, and also, I was thinking maybe if they both didn't eat of it.
But that passage in Numbers gives us the hint that maybe even when Eve had eaten the fruit, there's still time for Adam to intervene. And he didn't do it. How many times? I mean, you can kind of put yourself there and go, okay, at what point could Adam have stopped? He could have stopped when the serpent first spoke. He could have stopped this whole thing when the serpent spoke with adding a word to what God actually said. The knots in there. He could have stopped this when Eve spoke up and added on to God's admonition about the law. He could have stopped her when she looked at the tree. He could have stopped her when she decided, hey, that looks pretty good. He could have stopped her when she reached out. She could have stopped her when she bit. How many times could he have stopped her and didn't?
5 or 6 times.
At least. At least. Yes.
And before we judge Adam so harshly, how many times do we do the same thing?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Here's my point, is that Moses, remember, Moses is writing this to his audience, and they've got the law right in front of them. And Moses is pointing out how stupid all of our decisions about sin are. And he says, and it goes all the way back to great-great-granddad Adam and Eve. We are perpetually stupid. Once we're here, but quickly we stopped being naive and quickly went over to intentionally ignorant. Moses is really showing us how stupid sin is. And he's waving his hand, look at me, I'm stupid too. I don't get to go in the promised land. But he's saying over and over again, look, to go against what God has declared as good is invariably stupid. And that congenital stupidity goes all the way back to our first ancestors. We all do it. We all do it. All the way back to Adam and Eve. Because then you start imagining this, in your mind's eye, you're going, pick a sin, any sin, doesn't matter. Whatever, with the argument that you had this morning, whatever you did, anything there, all right. And you start going, be real critically honest with yourself, and you go, I could have stopped that there. I could have stopped it there. It would have been really easy if I'd stopped it there. Do you see?
Yeah.
If we look back with honesty on ourselves, we can realize that the sin could have stopped at any one of those points.